Welcome, dear listeners. Tonight, we journey to a magical kingdom where peace thrived under the wise Queen Elira. But shadows lurk, and darkness threatens the land. Join us as we follow Liana, a brave huntress who must embark on a quest to restore balance and save her kingdom. Find a cozy spot, close your eyes, and let the soothing tale of the celestial crown of power guide you into peaceful dreams. Once, in a kingdom cradled by rolling hills and emerald forests, there was peace, and the land prospered under the rule of Queen Elira. Her wisdom, they said, came from the stars themselves, and her reign was marked by harmony, as if the heavens smiled down upon her every decision. The rivers flowed gently, the harvests were bountiful, and the people knew no fear. It was a golden age that promised to last forever, but no golden age lasts without shadow. In the deep recesses of the kingdom, a darkness stirred, a prophecy long forgotten by the people, but never truly erased from time. Whispers filled the air, carrying rumors of a shadowed figure known only as the Dark Sovereign. His name was like a distant storm, far from reach, but destined to arrive. One fateful night, beneath a sky ablaze with falling stars, the kingdom was overthrown. It happened swiftly, as if the stars themselves had turned against Queen Elira. The Dark Sovereign, cloaked in the night's deepest black, appeared in the throne room, and with him came a chilling wind that swept through every corner of the kingdom. Queen Elira, though brave, was powerless against his dark magic, and in mere moments she was gone, banished to a fate unknown. The once thriving kingdom was thrown into chaos. The fields withered, the rivers slowed, and a thick mist covered the land, choking the sunlight. The people, who had once sung songs of peace and prosperity, now lived in fear of the Dark Sovereign's reign. Balance had been broken, and hope was nothing more than a flicker in the hearts of the people. Far away, in the shadow of the eastern mountains, lived a young huntress named Liana. Her days were spent tracking the wild deer that roamed the forests and gathering herbs for her village. She had heard the tales of the kingdom's fall, but had never ventured beyond the safety of her home. She was content in the simplicity of her life, for the darkness that plagued the kingdom had not yet reached the mountain's foothills. But one evening, as Liana returned from the forest, she noticed something strange. The air was thick with an unsettling quiet, as if the world itself had held its breath. Her village was still, the usual sounds of chatter and laughter absent. She followed the silence until she found her grandmother, an elder known for her knowledge of old legends, standing at the edge of the village, staring into the sky. "The stars are weeping," her grandmother whispered, her voice trembling. "The balance has been broken." Liana, though curious, did not understand. She was young, and the ancient prophecies were mere stories to her, nothing more. But that night, as she lay in her small cottage, she dreamt. In her dream, a celestial figure, draped in robes woven from stardust, appeared before her. The figure's eyes glowed with the light of 1,000 galaxies, and in their hand they held a crown unlike any Liana had ever seen, gleaming with the power of the heavens. The celestial crown of power, the figure intoned, their voice soft but powerful, like the wind rustling through the trees. You are the chosen one, Liana. The kingdom is in grave danger, and you must restore the balance. Liana woke with a start, her heart racing. The dream felt more than just a figment of her imagination. It was as if the stars themselves had spoken to her. The next morning, she sought out her grandmother, recounting every detail of the dream. Her grandmother listened in silence, her face pale but resolute. It is as the old prophecies foretold, her grandmother said. The celestial crown exists, but it is hidden. Only the one destined to restore balance can find it. Though fear gnawed at Liana, a sense of duty stirred within her. She could not turn away from what she knew in her heart to be true. The darkness had already swallowed the kingdom, and if it reached her village, there would be no hope left. And so, with a heavy heart but newfound resolve, Liana made her choice. She would leave her village behind, venture into the unknown, and seek the celestial crown of power. It was the only way to save the kingdom, to restore the balance the stars themselves had once bestowed upon Queen Elira's reign. Thus, her journey began, a quest to find the crown, to face the dark forces that threatened her world, and to bring the light back to the kingdom that had long since fallen into shadow. Liana ventured far from the village that had been her home, leaving behind the familiar paths through the forest and the steady comfort of her simple life. The eastern mountains rose high behind her as she traveled into the heart of the kingdom, where the darkness was said to be strongest. The air grew colder with every step, and the trees twisted into shapes that seemed to whisper of forgotten secrets. On the third night of her journey, as the full moon hung heavy in the sky, Liana was again visited by dreams. But this dream was no ordinary dream. It felt as real as the ground beneath her feet. She stood in a vast, open field beneath a sky filled with stars, brighter and closer than she had ever seen. In the center of the field stood a towering figure, draped in robes that shimmered with celestial light. Their face was obscured, but their presence filled the air with both warmth and awe. Liana knew without being told that this was the oracle she had dreamt of before. Liana, daughter of the stars, the oracle's voice echoed, though their lips did not move. You have come far, but the road ahead is filled with peril. You seek the celestial crown of power, and it is your destiny to find it. But know this, the power of the crown is not for the faint of heart. It will test you in ways you cannot yet imagine. Liana took a step forward, her voice steady, though fear clawed at her insides. I must restore balance. The darkness spreads, and the kingdom is falling. I cannot turn away from this path. The oracle nodded, and the stars above flickered in response. Your heart is true, but even the truest heart can be tempted. To find the crown, you must follow the signs I give you. First, you must journey to the temple of the stars, hidden in the mountains. There, you will face the trials of the keepers, ancient guardians who protect the crown's secrets. Only the worthy may proceed. As the oracle spoke, a great constellation formed in the sky, mapping out a path Liana would need to follow. The star shone brightly, showing her the way through forests and valleys, across rivers and ridges. Liana tried to memorize every twist and turn, every landmark the stars revealed. But be warned, the oracle continued, their voice deepening. Not all who walk this path will aid you. Darkness seeks to turn even the strongest souls. Trust your instincts, but guard your heart. The crown will only reveal itself to one who's pure of spirit. Before Liana could ask another question, the dream began to dissolve, the star swirling into a whirlpool of light that carried her back to the waking world. She awoke with a start, her heart pounding in her chest as if it had been galloping through the night. The moon was lower now, casting long shadows across the land, but the memory of the oracle's words remained vivid in her mind. She sat up, the grass cool beneath her fingers, and looked to the distant mountains where the temple of the stars awaited. She could feel the weight of her mission now more than ever, the responsibility of wielding the crown's power and the dangers that lurked ahead. But there was no turning back. Liana gathered her things and set off at first light, her feet light, but her mind heavy with thoughts of what lay ahead. She did not know how far the temple of the stars was, nor how she would face the keeper's trials, but she trusted in the oracle's guidance. The path had been shown to her, and she would follow it, no matter how dark or dangerous it might become. As she journeyed, Liana found herself thinking of the people she had left behind. Her grandmother, the village, even the simple peace of her days as a huntress. They all seemed so far away now, as if they belonged to another life entirely. But the kingdom was worth saving, and if she succeeded, the balance would be restored, and light would once again fill the land. Little did she know that the trials of the keepers would be just the beginning. Darkness was closer than she realized, and her journey was far from over. Still, she pressed on, the stars now her only companions as they blinked in and out of sight, like watchful eyes guiding her through the unknown. The path to the hidden temple of the stars was long and treacherous. Liana's feet ached as she climbed higher into the mountains, the air thinning and the winds biting cold. The oracle's words echoed in her mind, a constant reminder of the trials that lay ahead. She had to prove her worth if she were to find the celestial crown and restore balance to the kingdom. As the days passed, Liana followed the constellation the oracle had shown her. By night, the stars above guided her steps, and by day, she navigated through narrow passes and dense forests, her eyes ever watchful for signs of danger. The landscape around her grew wild and ancient, as if untouched by time. Giant trees towered above her, their branches twisting toward the sky, while beneath her feet, the earth seemed to hum with forgotten magic. At last, after what felt like an eternity of climbing, she found it. The hidden temple lay nestled in a secluded valley between two jagged peaks. Its stone walls, covered in moss and ivy, shimmered faintly under the starlight, as though the temple itself were alive with celestial energy. Liana's breath caught in her throat as she approached. There was an undeniable power here, something far older than the kingdom itself. The entrance to the temple was guarded by two enormous stone statues, figures draped in robes that mimicked the stars, their faces veiled. The keepers of the stars. Liana had heard stories of these mysterious guardians as a child, but to see them in person was another thing entirely. Their silent presence filled her with awe and a quiet fear, for she knew that to pass them, she would have to face their trials. Liana stepped closer to the temple, her heart racing. As she crossed the threshold of the archway, the air around her seemed to shift, growing heavier with magic. She was no longer outside, but standing within a vast chamber lit only by the faint glow of the stars carved into the ceiling above. The walls shimmered like the night sky, and in the center of the room stood a large circular pool of still water. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps echoed behind her. Liana whirled around, her hand instinctively reaching for the dagger at her belt. But there was no one there. The temple was empty, except for the statues, which had moved. The stone figures now stood on either side of the pool, their veiled faces turned toward her. The keepers had come to life. Liana, chosen of the stars, one of the statues intoned, its voice deep and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. You seek the celestial crown of power, but first you must prove your heart is true. Are you prepared to face the trials? Liana swallowed, her throat dry, but she nodded. I am. The second statue's voice rang out, softer but no less commanding. You will be tested 3 times. Each trial will ask of you a sacrifice, a piece of yourself that you must offer in exchange for the power you seek. Only then will the crown reveal itself to you. Without hesitation, the first trial began. The water in the pool rippled, and out of its depths rose a vision, an image of Liana's village, the home she had left behind, her grandmother, the familiar faces of her people. They appeared before her as if alive, going about their daily tasks, unaware of the darkness looming over the kingdom. A pang of longing gripped Liana's heart. She missed them, more than she had allowed herself to admit. "Your first trial," the first keeper said, "is the trial of the heart. To restore the balance, you must let go of the life you once knew. The peace of your village will never again be yours, for the one who wields the celestial crown can never return to what was. Can you accept this?" Liana stared at the vision, her heart heavy with the weight of her choice. Could she truly let go of the life she had known? The simple days of hunting in the forest, the warmth of her grandmother's fire. But deep down, she knew the answer. The kingdom needed her. The balance had to be restored. With a deep breath, Liana stepped forward. "I accept." The vision dissolved into mist, and the water stilled. The first trial was complete. "You have passed the trial of the heart," the second keeper said. "2 more trials remain." Liana's pulse quickened as she prepared herself for the next challenge, knowing that each step would bring her closer to the crown and further from the life she once knew. The temple chamber grew colder as Liana stood before the keepers. The faint light from the starry ceiling above casting eerie shadows on the stone floor. She had passed the first trial, but her heart still ached from the weight of her sacrifice. The life she had known, the quiet village, the forest she loved, was forever beyond her reach. But there was no turning back. The fate of the kingdom hung in the balance, and the celestial crown was her only hope. "You have proven your heart's resolve," the first keeper said, its voice as steady as the stars themselves. "But the journey ahead requires more than the strength of the heart. To wield the crown, you must possess clarity and wisdom beyond what you see before you." The second keeper stepped forward, raising its hand toward the pool in the center of the chamber. The water rippled once more, and this time, a second vision emerged from its depths. Liana watched as the waters formed an image of a long winding road, shrouded in mist and darkness. Along the road were figures, some familiar, some not, each carrying burdens, their faces obscured. The path ahead was unclear, as if reality itself was shifting. "This is your second trial," the second keeper said softly. "The trial of the mind. The crown grants not only power, but also the gift to see beyond the surface of things. You must learn to discern truth from illusion, for the darkness you face will seek to deceive and mislead you." Liana frowned, her gaze fixed on the shifting images. She did not understand what was being asked of her. "How do I know what is real?" she asked. The keepers were silent for a moment, their veiled faces unreadable. Then the first keeper spoke again, its voice carrying the weight of ages. "You must trust not your eyes, but your spirit. What is real and what is false? Only one who walks with purpose can distinguish between them." The words filled Liana with doubt. How could she trust in something as intangible as her spirit? But there was no time for hesitation. The images in the water began to blur, swirling into a vortex of shadow and light. and then the scene shifted once more. Liana found herself standing in a dense, foggy forest. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching toward her like skeletal hands. The air was thick with mist, making it impossible to see more than a few steps ahead. She walked forward, her footsteps light, but her mind wary, every sound in the forest sharpening her senses. Ahead of her, a figure emerged from the fog. Liana's heart leaped. Was it her grandmother? The figure called out to her, a voice she knew well, filled with warmth and familiarity. Liana, my child, you've returned. Come, let us go home. Liana hesitated, her eyes narrowing. This could not be real. Her grandmother was far from here, safe in the village, or at least she hoped so. But the fog played tricks on her mind, and doubt crept in. What if this was real? What if her grandmother had followed her, fearing for her safety? But as Liana stepped closer, the figure's form wavered, its edges blurring like a reflection in water. It was an illusion. With a deep breath, she drew back, closing her eyes and focusing on the light within her heart. She could feel the crown calling to her, pulling her forward, away from the false comfort of the illusion. She could not be swayed. I will not be deceived, Liana said firmly, her voice echoing through the mist. You are not real. The figure dissolved into the fog, its voice fading like the wind. The path before her cleared, and the mist lifted, revealing a single object at the forest's end. A shard of light glowing softly against the shadows. Liana approached the shard, her heart racing. As her fingers touched it, a warmth spread through her body, filling her with a sense of clarity she had never known. The shard pulsed with energy, and suddenly the world around her sharpened. She could see the true nature of things, the hidden traps of the darkness, the illusions that sought to lead her astray. The shard of light was the first piece of the celestial crown. You have passed the trial of the mind. The second keeper's voice echoed from the temple walls as the vision of the forest faded, returning her to the chamber. This shard will guide you on your journey, revealing truth where there is deception. But remember, clarity of mind is only part of your strength. Liana nodded, her grip tight around the glowing shard. She could feel its power flowing through her, but it was not overwhelming. It was subtle, a quiet strength that gave her the ability to see through darkness. The first piece of the crown had been found, but 2 more trials awaited her. You must now journey to the caverns of eternity, the first keeper said, its voice heavy with ancient wisdom. There, you will face the final trial. Liana bowed her head, the shard glowing in her hand. She had passed the trial of the heart, and now the trial of the mind. With the shard of light to guide her, she felt more prepared than ever. But she knew the path ahead would only grow darker, and the final trial would test her in ways she could not yet imagine. With the shard's light illuminating her way, Liana set off once more, her resolve unshaken, her heart fixed on the task ahead. Liana pressed forward, her path now lit by the soft glow of the shard of light she had earned in the trial of the mind. It pulsed faintly with each step, guiding her through the wild landscape that stretched out before her like a dark ocean. The mountains, once distant and imposing, had given way to a barren wasteland. The air felt heavy, thick with a gloom that seemed to sink into her bones. This was the kingdom as it had become under the reign of the Dark Sovereign, stripped of its beauty, its spirit drained. Her destination lay ahead, the caverns of eternity, a place where few dared to venture. Legends spoke of its depths as endless, a maze where time itself bent and twisted, and where shadows lurked in every corner. It was there, the oracle had said, that Liana would face her final trial. But as she grew closer, her heart whispered doubts. She had passed 2 trials, but each had taken something from her. Her ties to her old life, her sense of safety in the world she once knew. What would the final trial demand? As she approached the mouth of the caverns, a cold wind whipped through the desolate valley, howling like the cries of lost souls. The entrance was jagged and dark, like the gaping maw of some ancient beast. The ground beneath her feet trembled, as if the very earth was warning her to turn back. But Liana tightened her grip on the shard, its warmth a small comfort in the encroaching cold, and stepped inside. The darkness swallowed her immediately. The air grew colder still, and the walls seemed to close in around her. Yet the shard in her hand glowed steadily, casting long shadows across the cavern walls. The light illuminated strange carvings, symbols and runes that twisted in and out of sight, too ancient for her to understand. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the echo of her footsteps. Deeper and deeper she went, her path winding like a serpent through the heart of the earth. The further she ventured, the more she felt the presence of something watching her. The shadows flickered and danced, as if alive, and the air grew heavier with each breath. It was here, in the heart of the caverns, that Liana sensed the final trial awaited her. Suddenly, the shard flickered, its light dimming. Liana's pulse quickened. Something was wrong. She held the shard close, willing it to stay bright. But the light faded further. The darkness pressed in on her, thick and suffocating. Her breath quickened, fear gnawing at the edges of her mind. Without the shard's light, she would be lost forever in the caverns. Just then, a low, guttural voice echoed through the cavern. "You have come far, Liana," it hissed, slithering through the air like a serpent. "But you are not ready to face what lies ahead." From the shadows, dark figures began to emerge. They were tall and twisted, their faces obscured by hooded cloaks. Wraiths of despair. Liana had heard of them in stories. creatures born from the anguish of the kingdom's suffering. Their very presence drained hope from the air, filling the space with an overwhelming sense of dread. "Turn back," one wraith whispered, its voice like a rasping wind. "You cannot win this battle. The crown is not meant for you." Another wraith drifted closer, its blackened hand reaching toward her. "You are too weak. Give up, and you will be spared." Liana's heart pounded in her chest. The shard of light, her only weapon, had nearly dimmed to nothing. The cavern was closing in, and the voices of the wraiths filled her mind, twisting her thoughts. Was she truly strong enough for this? Could she defeat the darkness that had spread across the kingdom, or would she fall like so many before her? But then, from somewhere deep within her, a quiet voice rose, a memory of the oracle's words. "The crown will only reveal itself to one who is pure of spirit." It was not strength alone that would save her. It was the light within her, the same light that had guided her through the trials of the heart and mind. The shard of light was a reflection of that strength, not the source of it. With renewed resolve, Liana closed her eyes, blocking out the wraith's whispers. She focused on the warmth inside her, the love for her kingdom, for her people, and for the balance she sought to restore. Slowly, the shard in her hand began to glow brighter, its light piercing through the darkness once more. The wraiths recoiled, hissing as the light reached them. "I will not give in to despair," Liana said, her voice steady. "The light is stronger than the darkness." The wraiths screamed as the light from the shard grew blinding, scattering them into the shadows. The cavern trembled, but Liana stood firm. As the last of the wraiths faded into the depths, the shard in her hand flared with brilliance, casting its light over the cavern. And in the farthest corner, a doorway appeared, hidden until now. Liana stepped forward, the shard's light guiding her through the doorway and into the final chamber. The last trial awaited her, but for the first time, she felt ready. She had faced the darkness, and the light had prevailed. The journey was not yet over, but Liana's spirit burned bright, and the celestial crown of power was almost within her grasp. The shard of light pulsed faintly in Liana's hand as she descended deeper into the mountains, the path growing narrower and more treacherous with every step. The once familiar warmth of the stars seemed distant now, and the world around her grew colder, darker, as though the very air carried the weight of ancient sorrows. The caverns of eternity were close. She could feel their pull in the marrow of her bones. It was as if the earth itself was urging her toward the final trial. The mountain's craggy cliffs loomed high above, casting jagged shadows over her path. Liana's breath fogged in the frigid air as she pushed forward, the shard of light her only guide through the desolate landscape. She had heard of the caverns in the old tales, whispered by the firelight when she was a child. It was said that the caverns were endless, filled with the echoes of those who had failed to pass their trials. Few had entered, and none had returned. Still, she pressed on, her heart steady. The shard had shown her the truth of things, revealing the illusions that sought to deceive her. But this place, with its sharp winds and eerie silence, held no illusions. Only a darkness that clung to her like a shadow, cold and relentless. At last, Liana reached the mouth of the cavern. The entrance was a yawning chasm, its edges jagged like the teeth of some ancient beast. A faint wind howled from deep within, carrying whispers that sent shivers down her spine. She hesitated for only a moment before stepping into the gloom, the shard of light illuminating the narrow passage before her. Inside, the air was thick and damp, and the ground beneath her feet was uneven. The walls of the cavern twisted and turned, etched with markings so ancient they were barely visible. Liana's pulse quickened as she ventured deeper, the sense of something watching her growing stronger. The light of the shard flickered faintly, as if even its power was struggling against the darkness that permeated the caverns. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the tunnels, and Liana froze. From the shadows ahead, figures emerged, tall, gaunt, and draped in tattered cloaks. Their eyes gleamed with a pale, ghostly light, and their skin was ashen and stretched tight over their bones. These were the wraiths of despair, creatures born from the kingdom's suffering, their existence fueled by the hopelessness that had taken root under the dark sovereign's reign. Liana's heart pounded in her chest, but she knew she could not falter. The shard of light flared in her hand, casting a brilliant glow that made the wraiths hiss and retreat slightly, though they still circled her, their hollow eyes fixed on her as if drawn to her very essence. "You cannot pass," one of the wraiths rasped, his voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "Turn back, or your soul will be lost to the darkness forever." Liana tightened her grip on the shard, its warmth reassuring her. She knew the truth now. These creatures, though fearsome, were nothing more than shadows. The real trial lay not in defeating them, but in resisting the despair they brought with them. She closed her eyes, focusing on the light within her, the shard's power filling her with clarity and strength. "I will not turn back," she said, her voice steady. "The kingdom needs me, and I will not be swayed by your lies." With those words, the shard of light pulsed brighter, its glow banishing the shadows that clung to the walls. The wraiths recoiled, their forms flickering like dying embers, unable to withstand the purity of the light. One by one, they faded into nothingness, their whispers silenced by Liana's resolve. For a moment, the cavern was still, and Liana allowed herself a breath of relief. But she knew the trial was not over. There was something deeper within the caverns of eternity, something that would test her in ways she could not yet foresee. She continued her descent, the air growing heavier with each step. As she reached the heart of the cavern, she saw it, a pool of inky black water, still as glass and surrounded by jagged rocks. In the center of the pool, half submerged in the water, was the second shard of the celestial crown. It gleamed faintly, like a star swallowed by the void. But as Liana approached, the ground trembled beneath her feet, and the pool rippled. From its depths rose a towering figure, its form obscured by a cloak of shadow, its eyes burning with an unnatural fire. This was the true guardian of the caverns, the final challenge in her trial. To claim the shard, the shadowed figure intoned, its voice deep and resonant. You must surrender your light. Will you face the darkness alone, or will you turn away, as all others have before you? Liana's heart raced, but she knew the answer. She had come this far, and she could not turn back now. She raised the shard of light high above her head, its glow cutting through the darkness. I will not surrender my light, she said firmly. I will carry it with me, no matter how deep the darkness may be. The figure paused, as if considering her words. Then with a final roar, it dissolved into the shadows, leaving the second shard of the crown shimmering in its place. Liana stepped forward, her hands trembling as she picked up the shard. It was cold to the touch, but as it joined with the first shard, a warmth spread through her, filling her with a renewed sense of purpose. The trial of the caverns of eternity was complete. 2 shards of the crown were now hers, but she knew the journey ahead would only grow darker. Liana emerged from the caverns of eternity, the cold weight of the second shard of the celestial crown resting against her heart. It had joined with the first, and together they pulsed with a strange, otherworldly energy that she could feel coursing through her veins. The trial had been harrowing, but she had passed, and now, with 2 pieces of the crown in hand, she was closer than ever to restoring balance to the kingdom. But as she stepped into the faint light of dawn, the air still crisp and sharp from the night, she was greeted by an unexpected sight. There, standing at the edge of the mountain pass, was Kale. Kale, the mysterious traveler who had accompanied her in the beginning, who had guided her with knowing eyes and soft words of encouragement. She had trusted him, though he had always carried an air of secrecy. And now, seeing him again after what felt like a lifetime, Liana's heart stirred with both relief and unease. "Kale!" she called, her voice echoing off the cliffs. "You're here. I followed you," he interrupted, his voice cool, almost too calm. He stepped forward, his figure cutting a sharp silhouette against the dawn's first light. "I couldn't let you face the caverns alone." Liana smiled, though something inside her felt unsettled. "You shouldn't have come. It was dangerous." Kyle tilted his head, his eyes glinting with something unreadable. Dangerous? Yes, but necessary. You've done well, Liana. You've passed the trials, found the shards, and now the kingdom's salvation is almost within reach. Something in his tone made Liana pause. It was too smooth, too practiced, like a rehearsed line from a play. The wind picked up, swirling around them, and for the first time Liana felt the full weight of the shards at her chest. A power that hummed with potential, but also a responsibility she could not yet fully grasp. Kale, she began cautiously. What are you really doing here? Kale smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. His hand shifted toward his cloak, and in one swift motion, he revealed a silver dagger, its blade glinting ominously in the early light. Liana's blood turned cold. I should have known you'd be suspicious eventually, he said softly, his voice now dripping with menace. But it doesn't matter. You've done exactly what I needed you to do. You retrieved the shards, passed the trials I could never hope to complete. And now, you're going to give them to me. Liana staggered back, her heart pounding. What are you talking about? Kyle's expression darkened, his eyes gleaming with a hunger that sent shivers down her spine. The Dark Sovereign promised me power beyond imagination if I helped him. He sent me to find you, to use you. I let you believe you were the chosen one, because you were the only one who could claim the crown. But now, Liana, you've served your purpose. For a moment, the world seemed to stop. The betrayal hit her like a storm, her breath catching in her throat. Kyle had been working for the Dark Sovereign all along, manipulating her every step of the way. The trust she had placed in him now felt like a blade twisting in her chest. You lied to me, Liana whispered, her voice trembling. Kyle's grin widened, and he stepped closer, the dagger gleaming in his hand. It was necessary. The Dark Sovereign will reward me handsomely for this. Hand over the shards, Liana. It's over. But as his words sank in, something within Liana stirred. Something stronger than fear. Stronger than the sting of betrayal. The light of the shards burned against her chest, and she felt their power rising, filling her with a newfound strength. She had passed the trials, not Kyle. She had been chosen by the stars themselves, and no betrayal could take that from her. No, she said, her voice steady now, her eyes narrowing. It's not over. Before Kyle could react, Liana drew the shard from her chest, its light flaring to life. The brightness of it was blinding, filling the mountain pass with a radiant glow that cut through the mist and darkness like a blade. Kyle staggered back, shielding his eyes from the sudden brilliance, his dagger dropping to the ground with a metallic clatter. You're wrong, Liana continued, her voice filled with the power of the stars. The crown doesn't belong to you, or the Dark Sovereign. The crown belongs to those who fight for the light, for the kingdom, And for balance, I am the one who was chosen, not you. Kale's face twisted in fury, but he couldn't get near her. The light from the shard pushed him back, the power of the crown protecting her. With a snarl, he turned and fled, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he had appeared. Liana stood alone in the mountain pass, the light of the shards dimming once more to a soft glow. Her heart was heavy with the weight of Kyle's betrayal, but she knew now that she could not trust anyone but herself. The final shard still awaited her, and the Dark Sovereign would stop at nothing to claim the crown's power. But Liana was no longer the girl who had left her village behind. She was stronger now, wiser, and more determined than ever to see this journey through. The stars had chosen her, and no darkness would stand in her way. With a deep breath, she turned her gaze to the horizon, where the final trial awaited. Liana's heart was heavy as she journeyed deeper into the wilderness. Kyle's betrayal still fresh in her mind. The sting of his deception lingered, but her resolve burned brighter than ever. She had 2 shards of the celestial crown, and with each step, she drew closer to fulfilling her destiny. The Dark Sovereign's reach was vast, but Liana knew she was destined to be the one to restore balance. The light in her heart had been tested, and it had endured. Ahead of her loomed the entrance to the Forgotten Forest, a place steeped in mystery and ancient magic. The trees stood tall and gnarled, their branches intertwining overhead, creating a thick canopy that blotted out the sky. There was no path, only a wall of green, dense and foreboding. But the shard of light at Liana's chest pulsed faintly, and she knew it was guiding her forward. With a deep breath, she stepped into the forest, the air immediately growing cooler and heavy with the scent of damp earth and moss. Each step seemed to echo in the unnatural stillness of the place, as though the forest itself were holding its breath. She had heard stories of the Forgotten Forest, a place where time itself could bend, where reality and dreams intertwined. Those who ventured too far were said to lose themselves, never to return. But Liana had no choice. The final shard awaited her within, guarded by the Starborn Guardian. As she ventured deeper, the light from the shard began to flicker, casting strange shadows on the forest floor. The trees twisted into strange, dreamlike shapes, and the air shimmered with a faint, otherworldly glow. It was as if the forest was alive, watching her every move, testing her as the temple had. Suddenly, the shard in her hand flared to life, its light cutting through the shadows like a beacon. Liana looked up and saw a figure standing in a small clearing ahead, bathed in the shard's light. The figure was tall and graceful, their body shimmering with a silver glow that matched the stars themselves. Their eyes were bright and filled with the light of 1,000 constellations, and their long flowing robes seemed to be woven from the night sky. The Starborn Guardian. Liana's heart pounded as she approached the guardian, her hand instinctively tightening around the shard. The guardian's presence was overwhelming, and yet there was a calmness in the air around them, a serene power that felt like a gentle breeze after a storm. Liana, daughter of the stars, the guardian spoke, their voice like the gentle rustling of leaves in the wind. You have come far on your journey. 2 shards of the crown are in your possession, but the final piece is not so easily won. Liana bowed her head, her voice steady. I will face whatever trial is necessary. The kingdom has fallen into darkness, and I am here to restore balance. The guardian's gaze softened, but there was a weight in their expression, as though they carried the burdens of ages past. It is not just power that you seek, Liana, but the wisdom to wield it. The celestial crown holds great strength, but only those who understand the true nature of light and darkness can wield it without being consumed. Liana swallowed hard, feeling the weight of the guardian's words. What must I do? The guardian stepped forward, their silver eyes never leaving hers. The final trial is the trial of the soul. The crown does not seek a hero of strength alone, but one of love, compassion, and understanding. You must prove that you understand what it means to carry both light and darkness within you. The air in the clearing grew colder, and the shard in Liana's hand began to dim. The guardian raised their hand, and suddenly, Liana was surrounded by swirling visions, memories of her past, her village, her grandmother, Kale's betrayal, and the suffering of the kingdom. But among them were darker images, her own fears, doubts, and the temptation of power. The weight of the crown pressed down on her, as if it was calling out to the darkness within her heart. Liana's breath quickened as she faced the swirling memories. She saw herself standing in the throne room of the Dark Sovereign, wearing the celestial crown, but her eyes were cold and her heart had hardened. She saw what could become of her if she allowed the power to consume her. You must choose. The guardian's voice echoed in her mind. Will you seek power for the sake of balance, or will you be tempted by the strength it offers? Tears welled in Liana's eyes. She understood now. The crown was not simply a weapon to defeat the Dark Sovereign. It was a burden, a responsibility that would forever change her. She could not let the crown define her, nor could she use it for revenge or dominance. The true strength of the celestial crown was not in its power, but in the light it brought to others. I choose balance, Liana whispered, her voice steady despite the storm of visions around her. I choose love and compassion, not power. As the words left her lips, the swirling visions dissolved, and the light of the shard flared back to life, brighter than ever. The guardians smiled softly, their eyes gleaming like the stars above. You have passed the final trial, the guardian said, their voice filled with quiet reverence. The crown is now yours to wield, but remember, its power lies in your heart, not in the crown itself. With a graceful motion, the guardian extended their hand, and from the very air itself, the final shard appeared, a brilliant star-shaped piece that completed the crown. Liana accepted it, feeling the weight of its energy merge with the others, the celestial crown now whole. As she held it, a sense of peace washed over her. The crown's power was immense, but she no longer feared it. She was its keeper, its protector. The darkness of the kingdom would soon face the light once more, and Liana, chosen by the stars, would restore balance. With the star-born guardian watching over her, Liana prepared for the final battle, the crown glowing brightly in her hands. The journey was nearly complete, and the Dark Sovereign's reign would soon come to an end. Liana stood at the edge of the Dark Sovereign's fortress, the celestial crown resting upon her brow, its light casting a brilliant glow against the shadowed sky. The fortress loomed before her, a jagged silhouette of black stone rising high above the desolate landscape. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and dark clouds churned overhead as if the heavens themselves were watching the final confrontation unfold. Her heart pounded as she took a step forward, her hand steady on the hilt of her dagger. The shards of the crown had merged into a single radiant piece, and now, with its power coursing through her, she felt both stronger and more vulnerable than she had ever been. The crown was not just a tool, it was a responsibility, and the weight of it pressed on her soul. But she had passed the trials, had faced the darkness within and without, and now stood ready to confront the one who had plunged her kingdom into despair. The gates of the fortress swung open with a low groan, as if they too feared what lay within. Liana stepped inside, the air growing colder with every step. The walls were lined with towering statues, their hollow eyes following her as she moved deeper into the heart of the Dark Sovereign's domain. Faint whispers echoed in the hallways, the voices of those lost to the darkness, reminding her of what was at stake. At the end of the long cavernous hall, the throne room awaited. Its high-vaulted ceiling was shrouded in darkness, but at its center stood the Dark Sovereign himself, cloaked in shadow, his figure barely visible except for the glowing red embers of his eyes. He was tall, imposing, and the air around him crackled with dark magic. Behind him, the land outside the fortress lay in ruin, a reflection of his reign. So, the Dark Sovereign's voice rumbled, deep and resonant. The little huntress comes at last. I knew you would, Liana. I have watched your journey with great interest. Liana's grip tightened on her dagger, but she kept her voice steady. Your reign ends here, Sovereign. The celestial crown has chosen me, and with its power, I will restore balance to the kingdom. The Dark Sovereign laughed. a sound that echoed like the crash of a storm. The crown. He gestured lazily toward her, his eyes glowing brighter. You think the crown will save you? It is but a trinket, a relic of old magic. The real power lies not in the stars, but in the shadows. With a sweep of his hand, darkness surged forward, filling the throne room with a thick, suffocating mist. Shadows twisted and writhed, forming shapes that clawed toward Liana, their cold fingers reaching for her heart. But Liana stood firm, raising the crown above her head. Its light flared to life, cutting through the darkness like a blade. The stars will not be dimmed by your shadows, she said, her voice rising with strength. I have seen through your lies, your illusions. You thrive on fear and despair, but your power is empty. The light within me is stronger than anything you can conjure. The dark sovereign's smile faltered for the first time, his eyes narrowing. You speak of light, but light can be snuffed out, little one. With a sudden roar, he unleashed his full power, the shadows swirling into a massive wave that rushed toward her, howling with fury. The ground beneath her feet trembled, and the air grew cold as ice. But Liana did not flinch. The celestial crown burned brightly, its light expanding outward, creating a barrier of shimmering starlight that the shadows could not penetrate. Liana stepped forward, her eyes locked on the dark sovereign. The kingdom does not belong to you. It belongs to the people who have suffered under your rule, and I will see them free. With those words, she channeled the full power of the crown. The light from the stars blazed with a brilliant intensity, filling the throne room with a blinding radiance. The shadows that surrounded the dark sovereign faltered, shrinking back as if burned by the purity of the light. The dark sovereign snarled, his form flickering, and for the first time there was fear in his eyes. You cannot defeat me, he bellowed, but his voice wavered. Liana pressed on, her heart steady and sure. I am not here to defeat you, she said softly. I am here to restore balance. With a final surge of energy, the light from the crown enveloped the dark sovereign, dissolving the shadows that clung to him. His figure wavered, crumbling beneath the weight of the starlight, until at last he vanished into the air like a wisp of smoke caught in a strong wind. The darkness lifted from the throne room, and outside the skies cleared. The clouds parted, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, the kingdom was bathed in the golden light of the sun. Liana stood alone in the throne room, the crown still glowing softly upon her head. The dark sovereign was gone, and with him, the shadows that had plagued the land. The kingdom was free, but the weight of the crown remained heavy. The guardian's words echoed in her mind. The crown's power is not yours to keep. With a deep breath, Liana lowered the crown from her head, feeling its warmth fade as she set it gently on the ground. She had done what she had come to do. The balance was restored. The stars had guided her, but the crown belonged to them, and it was time to return it to its rightful place. As she stepped outside into the light of a new dawn, Liana knew that her journey was over, but the story of the kingdom was just beginning.